Hello and welcome to Public Access America. This is Just the Tip. Hey everybody, this is Jason from Public Access America, and I literally just finished the live stream recording that we do on YouTube every Sunday, noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific, over on Public Access America. And I noticed that our conversations lead to disagreements and opinions and consensus, but the cool thing is that you get to go back and listen to the math of our conversation to see how we got to where we got to. And by listening to open-ended, diverse perspective podcasts like ours and the podcasts we support, you get to learn how to be a part of that. What I'd like you to do is ask your conservative broadcasters and media, how did they get to their opinions? Where is the math for their logic? Thanks for listening.
Just the tip. Just the tip. Just the tip. Just the tip. Thank you.
It is time now for something positive.
We might be headed to the promised land,
of speaking the truth
and finding our external liberty once we internally liberate ourselves.
Problem can only be solved when there is a kind of coalition of conscience.
Because that is how it works.
This is the beginning, it is not the finale, and that's why we're here, and that's why we rally.
We've got to be that creative minority.
Find a way to get in the way. I got in trouble. It was good trouble. It was necessary trouble.
Frankly, I know we've got to do something.
Ooh, oh, I like that shirt. Holy shit.
Yeah.
I just saw it as I was moving across the screen.
It's one of my favorites.
Hello everybody, welcome to Public Access America. He's Jeffrey, I'm Jason, and we get together once a week to talk about the week. I want to say thank you to Kai for complimenting us on our audio quality and for helping us make the theme song. And I wanted to say we had a new Inspirations Beyond Disabilities up with Sadie Taylor, Sadie the Blind Lady, and she reached out to us. She's making a website and she wanted more content for it. So we made an episode with her and she's kind of cool. So hopefully we get her on this show. How are you doing, Jeffrey?
Well, I'm hoping that my weeks of insanity are coming to an end soon, but who knows? This last week was like the hardest of it. It was.
I'm sorry.
I mean, it is what it is, you know. The great resignation has, left a lot of positions open, for better or worse. And, given the way the economy is sitting, the way that people are able to, with inflation being what it is, part-time positions aren't as desirable as full-time positions unless those part-time positions pay really well.
Yeah. I can only go from the experience around me, and I know my roommates had 4 jobs in the last 8 months, and that's simply because the jobs just weren't what he thought they would be. He went to go sell Harleys. Great job, right? They want you to make 30 phone calls and like 100 emails a day, and you have to pester people that walk in, and you have to like scam them to get them to and he just didn't like that. And like Home Depot was the same. It was great, but management didn't understand that they were there to take care of employees. They think they're there to take care of their bosses. So the system's just ass backwards, and it leaves all of the people that need money filling in. And I got to tell you, I don't even work, and this week was like a tractor pull on my soul. I can't imagine having a full schedule and kids and like family and partners and all of that. You're one of my best friends, and I don't want that for you. So I feel bad.
This is the thing. Like Debbie and I, we were talking about this, and just the stress of having to, do the thing constantly. And it's like, you do have that question pop up. At what point do you sit down and go, humanity wasn't meant to live like this?
Right. I mean, I don't know what people without diabetes think diabetes is. It's tough, man. It's just trying to either be way too tired or way too wired, and trying to balance that according to food that you can't afford is just utterly ridiculous. The food, I
Mhm.
ate celery, cauliflower, and homemade hummus for dinner. That's what I had to eat because when I had shredded mini wheats, it jacked my sugars up 200 and I couldn't get them down for 2 days, and
Mhm.
fuck, they fell last night and now they're back up again today. I'm just like, I don't, it's,
Yeah.
life is such a struggle in ways that I don't think like people understand. Like, I don't know, people that don't have these problems, people that have maids and butlers and people to do things for them, like we don't have all that. We can't just put our lives on somebody else's plate so that we can survive,
Well, well, I mean, you think about it. We used to have a mechanism of doing all of this. Think real hard, but go old school.
Shit, I don't know.
We used to only have one working spouse.
That's true. Yeah, that's true.
You know, one person took care of the household needs, the other one took care of the income. And that's all there was,
Wow.
and some people are able to do that still, and some people aren't. And
Mm,
it's difficult,
yeah.
you, especially like when you look at the amount of debt that modern America has. Like, Debbie and I paid off our credit cards. We have zero credit card debt for the first time in, well, for me the first time in since 2014, and for Debbie I don't even know how long it's been.
Yeah.
But the zero credit card debt. Like
Congratulations.
I can afford to put something on my credit card and then turn around and immediately pay it off.
That scares the
Like
shit
that's a
out of me.
first. But unfortunately, now I have, over $100,000 in student loan debt I have to deal
Yeah.
with because I needed to have an advanced education to make the money that I can to, it's just it's been this cycle. And, you know, some people are like, well, if you became a doctor, I'm like, yeah, I'd be $500,000 in debt and I would just die fucking broke.
Right. Somebody said to me, "Yes, my husband and I worked really hard. We went through school. We collected a lot of student debt. We spent the next 20 years paying it off. So do I want other people to have their debt relieved? Yes, because nobody should go through that."
Well,
And I
that's
like that. I really like that idea. A rape victim wouldn't hope
Mhm.
everybody else gets raped to normalize it, right? They would want rape ended. And that's how I feel about the scam that is debt in America. Somebody said, and it
Mhm.
really hit me, Republicans feel the way to control inflation is to make people poorer so they have less to spend, right? And Democrats want to give everybody a little more money so they can afford life better. And that really hit me, you know what I mean?
And it's a weird balance. Like Republicans, what they used to be. Republicans used to be of the mindset that they wanted to give Americans more money by removing taxes from their
Well,
life. That's what
from
it
their
used to be.
bosses too, right?
Yeah, that's what. Well, even individually, like some of the tax cuts that I was there with the Bush tax cuts. I was there,
Mhm.
with the Trump tax cuts, and arguably there were some pieces of it that worked. There really were. Um, but there were also a lot of pieces of it that just didn't work.
Yeah.
And the same gets said with the Democrats. The Democrats, what they want to do is they want to increase safety and regulation, and what that does is that ends up costing a lot in terms of tax money, but
Mhm.
you end up getting stability that you don't end up on this wild ride of up and down and am I boom or bust. It
Right.
just kind of peters out a little bit, and so it's just kind of like this weird juxtaposition that we end up swinging back and forth between rapid growth and expansion and just
Yeah.
dam busting, economic fallout versus stale stagnation, inflation, and just general lack of anything happening. It's like we kind of end up in this weird triangle of fiscal responsibility, stagnation, and opportunity, and you only get to pick two.
Right. The idea
And
is to hold the people back from the opportunities till the people that have money can create how to make it into a scam.
so it's just kind of like this weird and wild circular path. It's like, we end up, the thing about the Obama years weren't terrible. They weren't great either. Everybody wants to sit down and go, Obama was such a great president. I'd give him a C grade. He wasn't great. He wasn't terrible.
Right.
It wasn't like nothing amazing happened. Nothing really terrible happened. Like the biggest issue that we had was number one, healthcare costs shot up like crazy. I don't think the Affordable Care Act worked the way that anybody wanted it to.
It still doesn't. Mm-mm.
And on top of that, you ended up, I know that the economic side of things, Obama inherited a shit show. Let's be real honest about it. And everybody wants to, well, Obama and his low, yeah, he inherited that from the previous administration. That's just the way that
just
it
like
is.
Trump inherited his economics from Obama. That's the way it works.
Yeah. And so, for Obama, he had to try and create stability in a time of great instability. And it took a significant amount of time for a lot of those groups that got bailouts in order to get stable again.
Yeah.
But then once things got stable, there really wasn't any policy that helped push growth. It was just kind of deadlocked.
Right. Well,
nothing happened.
From the cars, we went to the banks. You know what I mean? To the housing market.
Well, the cars, the banks, the housing market was all at the same time.
Well, yeah, but the housing market was under Bush. But then the cars were during Obama's beginning, and then the banks were towards right when he fixed the ACA, and then he got the car manufacturers under control. Then the banks blew up. It was a tough time for Obama. You know what I mean?
But it was, and that all of that was during his first term. Let's be real clear. All of that happened during his first term.
And you're right. They did nothing to prevent all of that from happening again.
Now, during his second term is when you arguably, Obama's president, you can go for broke and try and, get some stuff going. Granted, he was up against a majority, Republican Senate and House that wasn't going to help, do anything. But I would also
new thing called the Tea Party, which was obstructionist. Yeah.
Yeah, and in a lot of ways, it was, cut off America's nose to spite its face, and then come in and say, we have the answers. And, that's where there was this chance, there was this opportunity to try and create growth, and it just never happened,
right.
And I would argue that, around 2012 is where we settled into this idea of it's my party's way or it's no way at all.
Yeah.
And that's where we're at today. And it's not just the Republicans that do it, it's the Democrats that do it too.
I agree. I just don't like a lot of the false equivalencies, but I can tell you that there's just as much of complaining within the Democratic Party as there is in the Republican Party. Like the Republican Party seems diverse because of the way it's the Tea Party, it's America First, it's conservatives, it's moderates. There is no such thing as a progressive Republican, right? But there's a progressive Democrat, and then there's moderate Democrats, and then there's the conservative Democrats. There's these factions, but they don't actually have legitimacy. It's not like they're their own parties. The independents don't have a portion of control to break up the split between halves. There's nothing like France. France didn't go more radical because within the Republicans, there's 4 parties, right? And those parties jockey for seats, proportional representation, as do the left. And so there's different versions, like Israel too. You can't form a government unless your factions all get the seats that they got in the election.
Right.
And then if those factions equal up to support the president, that's what happens. We don't have that. It's you either get Ford or Dodge, and there is no other way for you to go. And it just kind of sucks when the party you support doesn't listen to you. You're telling us what the problems are, Republicans and Democrats. They're both telling us what the problems are, but they're not hearing what we're saying to them. And so a Ron DeSantis, Ivanka Trump, Donald Trump, they're all sitting in little bubbles in Florida thinking they're kings. But once they step out of that bubble and see what reality is, like Elon Musk, you're on your ivory tower. You didn't know what reality was, and now it's hitting you a little bit in the face, just a little bit,
Right.
And that's the problem. Everything's backwards. Everything is working
Mm-hmm.
backwards. Even the school system, the way I think about it, we used to have
Mm-hmm.
art, we used to have music, we used to have break times for our minds to imagine, and we just don't, the kids don't get that anymore.
No.
It's all, what do they call that? Core education or whatever it is?
Well, I don't even know what you can really call it
Yeah.
anymore. It's really wild.
It's
And
housing kids at a in a cost effective way.
in yeah, kind of, I would say. Because a lot of the times you just end up with a bunch of administration, and it's like I don't even know why we have so much administration
Right.
when the issues at hand are more about, you know, our kids, getting adequate food when they're at school, our
Yeah.
kids getting, adequate number, student to teacher ratio. Like, I would honestly be curious what the admin to student ratio looks like in certain areas,
I agree.
because I guarantee you, for example, I'm going to pick on Florida. Like, somebody went through all of these fucking math books to find out if there was woke math, and I'm going, man, all I know is that I had like the same math books like from the 19 fucking 80s. Like, nothing changed.
Right. But there is
And
a question like if a person was 3/5 of a person and you had 40 people, how many people would that be? Like it's acknowledging that slavery existed without tackling the issue, and he had a problem with that. Well, two reviewers out of the I think 12 that reviewed books found two examples that they had an issue with that nobody else had an issue with.
that's the problem is that, you can copy that across the board. So you got two people out of 12 that have an issue, so those two people are going to change it for everybody.
Right.
And I would argue that's what the Republican Party looks like right now.
Yeah.
A couple of people have an issue, they're being the most vocal and the most bonkers, and rather than the rest of the party going, you know what, shut up, this is fucking dumb.
Yeah.
They're like, you know what, fuck it, we'll just let them run with it and we'll see what happens.
I think Republicans are like, this is out of control. People have way too many rights. Let's gather all of the rights under our tent and then we will disperse them the way we believe we need to disperse them. Like Joe Manchin said this Women Protection Act was too expansive. And that blew my mind because how much is too much of a right? You're giving women 70% of their rights. That's too much. 80%, is that too much? How much is acceptable? Like, why are we negotiating women's rights like that? And why is it Joe fucking Manchin, one guy, one man in the whole Democratic Party saying, no, I know best, women. You don't know what you're trying to get. I'll tell you what you need. What the fuck? Stay out of it, Joe.
Or my personal favorite, that I was actually just reading right before I got on, is the Oklahoma governor warning the tribes not to create abortion havens in the state of Oklahoma.
Wow.
I'm going, that's not a real good look if you know anything about, treaty rights between the U.S. government and the tribes, and telling them what they can and can't do on their own land is, that's a decision that you've made, and
Yeah.
yeesh. And so, you know what? It's one of those things. It's like, I don't understand
They don't
why politics is in this current state that it is.
because they're not mixing. They're not mixing.
Insane.
They're sitting within groups of like 10 like-minded people in an echo chamber. So when the governor of Alabama or Mississippi or Louisiana says, we're going to deny all trans people their rights because it's gross, they go back into their meeting and everybody gives them a high five and goes, yeah, you're right. But the problem is that there's like, what, 40 million other Oklahomans that don't feel that way, that aren't involved in the conversations that lead them to that radical point. Like, we sit here every day and we do the math of our conversation. How did we get to this? How did we get here? Well, you can listen and hear how we got to the point we got to. But Republicans don't do that. They sit in their little meetings and go, okay, and they get more radical and bounce things off like we do. And then they reach a point of racism makes sense. It's like, no,
they come up with some of these absolutely bonkers scenarios and boogeymen out there, and it's like,
but they get there. How did they get there? They don't tell us how they got there.
Well, and that's, for example, with this investigating whether or not, helping kids get trans affirming care is child abuse. Like, I'm just
Right.
sitting here going, so what you're telling me is that there's a child and the parents have to be involved. They're having a conversation and they're coming to the conclusion that this care is necessary, so they go seek out
Right.
a doctor who is accredited by whatever boards they have to be accredited by. They are licensed, insured, educated, all of this. They have a conversation. They have very, very, very strict rules on how they can and can't proceed in these sort of scenarios. Like, great interview was out there about how, like, over a series of like a year's worth of meetings, if there's ever any sort of inkling that this person might be waffling on whether or not they want this care,
Yeah.
they have to say no. Like, that's the rule that they have to follow. And so all of this to say that there have been all of these quote unquote freedoms of choice, and all of this time spent investigating whether or not this is an actual thing, and these states are going, no, you're not free to choose.
And I don't understand that. I don't understand the threat that a trans person poses to the country.
That's the thing is, like it's not even, I want to make myself clear. It's not about choosing to be trans. Let's
No, you're
make
not
sure that we
choosing to
understand
be
that
trans. No.
it's that choice of going through all of these different, talking with your parents and coming to that, consensus, talking to healthcare professionals, going through that consensus. Like, that's an active choice that a person has to make, to go through to all of these hoops in order to get to gender affirming care.
Of course. The way I liken it to right now is, imagine being in pain your whole life, like just this agonizing pain, and then a doctor says, I can relieve that pain because the pain isn't who you are. And he gives you treatment and you're not in pain anymore and you're free to be happy and stuff. People that want to transition, they're in pain. They're in agony because they don't match. What they feel doesn't match what they show, and they don't. It's so irritating. It's like having an itch you can't get at. It's just, you want to be yourself, and I don't understand why people care. I don't understand why Texas feels they need to get involved in a young child's
Now,
search.
and that's the biggest problem is that when you look at parties, they're like, these are the rights that you're going to get to have. And the thing is that when you look at the way that the Republican Party is pushing, it's on things that it doesn't make any sense.
Right.
Because this is the same group of people that says being gay is a choice. So when somebody chooses some, quote unquote, chooses something, then they immediately they sit down and they go, oh, freedom of choice, freedom of choice, freedom of choice. The moment they quote unquote choose, because that's how they view it, suddenly it's the wrong choice. Like, it's bad. And it's like, no, that's not how you platformed. I don't understand this.
Yeah, because I want a life where I'm hated to 40 by 60% of the country all of the time. Like, nobody chooses.
Who the fuck is choosing? Yeah, nobody chooses to live life on hard mode. Like,
right. And guess what? It's our opportunity to do that. My friend asked me that, she said, my daughter told me she's thinking about transitioning. And she said, what do I do? I said, you support her, because either she'll save her money and make that what she wants to do, or she'll phase out and think that maybe she's just non-binary. Maybe the more opportunities she has to be free and dress like how she wants to dress and eat how she wants to dress and cut her hair the way she wants to cut her hair, she'll find an equilibrium that doesn't mean transitioning. Or maybe she'll feel so strongly about it that she'll save up her money. You can also help her financially get there, but you don't have to make that decision at all. It's her decision. It's the child's decision to make, right? Until it affects the parent in some way, monetarily. Or I could see a parent going, you understand that might be a difficult road to travel, but I'm here for you.
Well, and that's exactly, it's like, you support your kids in their journey, and you don't, this is one of those things where, you may not fully understand it. Fuck, I'll never fully understand it. It's just not mine to
I don't
understand.
have to,
How
right?
could
I
I?
don't have to. I just have to support them because I
Exactly.
love them. Because I love them.
And you just, as a parent, you also have to make it very clear, like, what your limitations of support are. And I'm not saying, like, like, when I say limitations of support, I'm not saying, this is all that I'm willing to accept. It's more like, this is all that I can afford
Right.
to
I
do.
have 2 jobs. I can't take on another job to help you pay for that. But I will definitely
And
be there to support you with rides and
right,
everything else.
right. And that's the tough part, because, as a parent, you want to help, your kid get, the care that they need, but you also have to live within the confines of the way that the current system works. And the current system is that in most cases, gender affirming care is considered elective, and so you're not getting coverage for this stuff.
Right.
You're paying out of pocket.
Right.
So, and it is highly dependent on where you're at too, and it's highly dependent on the plan that you have, and it's highly dependent on any number of different
Yeah.
things. It's a rough road when somebody decides they want to seek that care, but then you have, like everything else, you have an entire deck of cards stacked against you in order to make it through to get to whatever what your desired outcome is. Reason number 110,361 why the medical system currently is in a fucking mess. The fact that you have political parties deciding what healthcare professionals do is just absolutely insane to me.
Right.
Could you imagine if the role was reversed? Doctors had to tell politicians what they could and couldn't do in the political realm. Not even just like, imagine somebody who's literally just who's a heart surgeon. Their specialty is heart surgery.
Yeah.
And they go into politics and say, no, now here's how you need to do roads and bridges. And they know nothing about roads and bridges.
Oh, hi, Rand Paul. How are you doing? I didn't see you there.
He's a fucking optimist. He's a doctor. I'm like, he's a fucking eye doctor.
And he obviously knows more about foreign wars and all that than we
The thing
do.
about Rand Paul is that I don't know what his schedule looks like, but I'm pretty sure it's, every day his brain calls in with anal glaucoma, because his brain just definitely is not seeing his ass come into work today. It's just not it.
Yeah.
Like, it's like his body shows up and his brain's like, yeah, fuck it, I'm gonna flip the switch off and I'm just gonna whatever comes out's what you get.
Well, whatever the Kremlin readout says is what he does. I think him and Ron Johnson should just form the Communist Party and get it over with. You know what I mean?
It's just so fucking wild. Like, and then, but he's a doctor.
He's a doctor, yeah.
Yeah, because I'm totally going to go to an eye doctor for a discussion on women's health care,
right.
trans health care, whether or not I should get a fucking vasectomy, or whether or not I have colon cancer.
He's
a fucking eye doctor.
That made me think about something.
Christ.
You want women to have more babies for some reason, and you don't want to make an economy that benefit. You want to keep people poorer to stunt inflation, but if you keep us poorer, we don't have the money to have more babies. It's your economic decisions that cause the amount of abortions. If Jeffrey could sit at home all day and have babies while Devi went to work at one job and made a living wage, maybe they'd have more kids. Maybe I would have had more kids if I wasn't fucking stuck making literally nothing and busting my ass 60 hours a week, So that went with the Joe Manchin. Who the fuck are you?
And that's the other thing is, the Republican Party's like, oh, buy all these luxury goods, goods. When you have one person that's an earner,
right,
and you have a number of kids, luxury goods are not what's going to happen.
No, your kid is the luxury good.
Right. It's like, why do you think, the 50s and 60s looked the way that it did?
Yeah.
People are like, oh, go out and buy things, video game consoles, TVs, all these other things. It's like, It's like, I understand why my mom only had one TV. I understand why, everything that they did was play outside with make believe.
Right.
Because you can't fucking afford all of these different things. And, at the time, means of production was very limited. So,
Yeah.
having one TV was a fucking luxury. I get
And
it. But
theft was out
now,
of the question back then too, by the way. Nobody went over to their neighbor's yard and stole like metal, so go recycle it. You know what I mean? It's like that wasn't how the world worked. Scams weren't rampant. You could live your life
Mhm.
like if you earned $2,000, you knew you had $2,000. It's not like it was going to be chipped away with fees and tricks and, weird things that
Right.
suddenly happen. Oh, your property taxes are being raised by 25%. Why? Well, because the governor hates Disney. Damn. You know, I just bought a house here.
Well, and that's one of those things too. It's like everybody sits down and they think that, okay, I'm finally, this party is finally going to get it right, and no, they don't.
No.
They really don't.
Mm-mm.
It's, it's one of those things. It's why I tell people, welcome to why I'm a libertarian. It's like I've sat down and I've watched as both of these main parties just, are there good things that they can do at times? Sure,
Yep.
absolutely. But by the vast majority of things that they do, I either end up dealing with people trying to turn my country into a theocratic society, or I deal with them trying to legislate me into, having to ask daddy government if I can breathe.
Right.
And neither of those things work for me.
Mm-mm. I was thinking
It's like,
about it with education, and you made me bring that back. The thing about our education system is kids would get more use out of just documentaries playing on the wall. But the point of it, when you said teacher to student ratio, it made me think there's kids that learn a little differently. They need that musical program in their day so that they can imagine the solutions that they had to ponder in their first classes, right? But then there's folks like you or Dan, maybe you don't need the music as much because you are more scientific. You need more of a biology, a chemistry. You need that sort of stimulation. And then there's other kids, they're like, I need to get to gym. I want to play basketball. I want to play football. I want to move because it's the exercise that gives me the endorphins that
mhm.
make me imagine solutions. And so every kid's different. And we can't just shove them in a box and throw rabbit food into it and say survive. That's a horrible way
and you
for our
can't
educational system to be.
and you can't throw a bunch of homework at them afterwards and expect them to be happy and healthy.
Yeah, you're not teaching them how to
I
process the answers.
I asked I asked my mom, because I wanted the answer. What did homework look like for you when you were a kid?
Right.
How much homework did you come home with? 30 minutes
Mm-hmm.
tops. I'm like, per class? And my mom was like, what? No,
No.
for every class,
Right. You
totally.
were given time in the class to do the homework.
And you had study halls throughout the
Uh-huh.
day.
And lunch and friends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you had the opportunity to get stuff done so that way if you did have any sort of homework, it was very minimal.
Right.
And that's the problem is that, you have kids that are literally going to school in my kid's case, going from school from 7 a.m. until, um,
3? Yeah.
3:30. And then after that, they can have anywhere from, 30 minutes to 3 hours worth of homework to do at the end of the day. And think about that, and
Mm-hmm.
then so then what ends up happening is that all of those kids who now have spent all of their time doing their homework now have to eat, try and find, something to unwind
Right.
with. And they wonder why kids are staying up until fucking midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning with their friends, and then getting up at 6 o'clock to do it again the next
And why
day.
they're so stressed and why there's school shootings and why there's anxiety and autism and all of this stuff rampant in our schools and ADHD. It's because of the pressure we put on our kids.
The autism and the ADHD I wouldn't put towards
Well,
that, but I would say
let's
that
say that it's
there's a lot of pressure because
yeah.
they don't know how to teach kids on the
That stuff
spectrum, or they don't know how to work with kids that are on the spectrum.
pressure reveals sometimes things you can handle certain things, you can hide certain things, you can mask certain things, but pressure puts you on the spot. And when it's noticed in school, it should be noticed in school. But somebody with autism that's homeschooled that can step away from things, you might not really notice it as much, is all I'm trying to say. school
That's
reveals things, pressure, peer
well, I
pressures
mean,
and academic pressures. That just puts such a stress on you. I could see why you could form, or why where it could increase these things. You know what I mean?
well, it's overstimulation
Yeah.
is what it is.
You don't
They
have the
don't.
time to decompress from it. So when you're at a
You don't
10
have the
and go back to an 11 and then back and relax at a 9, yeah, that's what I'm trying to say.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, no, we'll
Yeah,
get there.
yeah. I don't
So
think those things are created out of pressure, but I
no,
think
no, no.
people have these tendencies naturally that can be made better or worse through care or pressure.
Well, I think it goes to that point of when you look at overstimulation, you start to see more of these problems come to the surface,
Mhm.
and so then the question is, are people being stimulated too much with school? Is there too much going on that kids are not able to, actually develop
Yeah.
healthy habits? You think about it, it's like the pressure for kids to do any number of different topics, prior to graduating. You know, Even for me 10 years ago, not even 20 years ago now, actually, doing things like trigonometry and chemistry and physics were meant for people who were more advanced.
Then you?
And now it's almost like you have to take this stuff
Ah, right.
just to graduate. And it's like, no, like as somebody who literally is a mathematician,
Right.
who does data analysis, who does, tracking and trending, who uses complex
Mhm.
equations to solve for problems. No, the vast, like I love my education in chemistry and physics. I have never used it.
Right.
And that's the thing is like I know enough about it now to where I can have conversations on it. But if you're trying to tell me that all kids need to learn those things, I'm going to tell you no. They need to know the basics.
Right.
We need to understand gravity, and you need to understand, how chemical reactions work just a little bit. Like, fun fact, when you make toast, that's a chemical reaction. Ooh,
Right.
things that
Baking
learn
soda is
simple things.
man-made. What?
Dihydrogen monoxide is not poison.
Right.
Things like that, enough to understand that people are going to use certain things to try and
Yeah.
just enough to understand what the basics are and how to look things up in a way that you know kids have these great tools at their fingertips now, and we should be teaching them more about how to look things up.
Yes.
One of the things that we always said in my master's program was is that it's not that most of us were smarter than the average individual. It's that we just learned how to use Google better for the problems that we needed to solve.
I needed my friend to teach me how to search. I had no idea. I was typing paragraphs into the search bar because I was like, well, I want to know how to do this. And he was like, just use the keywords. You don't need to diagnose your engine in the Google search bar. You just look up, your engine number. I was like, oh, like, yeah, you're
Yeah.
right. And when I took math, it was consumer math. I had to learn how to balance a checkbook. But Jeffrey, I didn't know what the
Hmm.
fuck a checkbook was, So it's the same as trigonometry. If I don't have any basis in it, why would I understand it? Like,
But the difference there was is that when you became an adult,
yeah, I used
you were
it.
going to
Uh-huh.
have you were going to use it. Now, like my kid was sitting down here, like, what do you know about checkbooks? And I actually started laughing, and I'm like,
Right.
oh shit, they're still teaching this?
Right. But and
Like,
that's the thing. Like, wouldn't you rather have, instead of giving your kid 3 hours of homework, give your kid 1 hour of family time where you're all on your devices coming up with like, my teacher wanted me to ask at the dinner table about trigonometry, what we all knew
mhm.
about it. And then we could all sit
Be the
there.
only one that would be able to
But
answer.
or okay, checkbooks. My teacher wanted me to ask the table this, and your kids, and that gives you something to talk about, and then you can actually search together and be like, oh, here's a resource I found, here's a resource I found, instead of go to the encyclopedia, here's the link, here's the book, here's the page, read that, memorize it, and repeat it back to me so I know that you might remember it. I think the family discussion might be a better opportunity than homework, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Now, all right. It's time to take something to
That would
task
help
here, because
parents too as well, by the way.
I got something that actually pisses me off.
Uh-oh, cool.
So, after the leaked draft opinion had come out, a bunch of students across the country decided to stage a walkout on a particular day.
Okay.
Now, my kids informed me ahead of time, and they informed Debbie and I, and it's like, yeah, okay, cool. Let's go over some safety things, just because this is a very heated topic, and hopefully, while I hope that you're safe protesting, understand that there's any number of issues that can crop up. Make sure you got your phones fully charged, have your battery pack with. They packed snacks, they had raincoats, they had any number of different things.
Get millennials.
Because and a lot of this they did on their own. They were just like, what do you think about this? I'm like, I wouldn't do that. Or what about this? No, that's actually a really good idea. You should definitely do that. And it's like,
they go prepared. The biggest one, we just went high. We just went high with a sign. Get their packing supplies and stuff. That's so cool to me.
But now you look at but that's the thing though, is that the way that the political climate is right now, the days of just going high with a sign are just not a thing anymore. I know, because you have people that literally show up looking for a violent clash at these things. Like, that's what they're hoping for. And I'm like, no, that's a terrible decision.
Right.
And so, my kids were like, we're walking out of school. Okay. Best of luck. Go do it. So they left, and I get a message from the school saying that, they have an unexcused absence. So I call to excuse the absence. I'm like, whatever, It's not a big deal. The school won't excuse the absence.
Oh, okay.
And they won't excuse it because, well, we're a closed campus, and without the parent checking the kids out and this, that, and the other. I'm like, I want you to understand something very clearly. Number one, it's not like the kids were just leaving because they felt like going to the fucking grocery store to get a candy bar, or that they were headed out to go get themselves high on drugs, or do whatever weird crazy thing that the school has painted this imaginary scenario to be. There is a very important issue to these kids that they felt that it was incumbent upon them to leave class and go to the state capitol to actually protest. And there were hundreds of kids there, and a bunch of other people that were there as well. And so when I called to excuse the absence, what I told the school was, I'm excusing my kids for the day because they are out exercising their First Amendment right to free speech and getting a first-hand lesson in government civics. And to me, that should be it. It's like they were exercising their First Amendment right to free speech, and they were getting a first-hand lesson in government civics.
I like that. I mean,
that's an educational moment, is what it is. It really is an educational moment. And the school's like, no, unexcused. I went,
okay.
I'm sorry, what? So the school is telling me that they're not going to excuse it.
Of course.
Like, so here's the problem.
Because you followed the rules, you did everything they asked, and then they changed a rule. Nope. They inflated a rule and made it more important at that time.
Well, and here's the problem. If I excuse the absence, they're contacting me saying, hey, your kid has an unexcused absence. Please call in to excuse it. And I call in to excuse it. That is not the school's, it should not be the school's decision to say, no, we're not going to excuse it.
Exactly. And if your kid...
Especially when I can prove that if it's not, for some type of doctor's appointment, that it's actually for, I would call it an educational purpose.
Yeah, a field trip.
It literally is an unplanned field trip that has an absolute important purpose to not only their lives with the legislative process that is unfolding before them, but also even just that firsthand experience of what does exercising my First Amendment rights
And
look
why
like?
do I need to do it? What's the importance of it? Yeah. But
Why is it important to have that, that education in government
mhm.
civics? That was a learning opportunity for those kids, that whether or not you agree with the politics or why they checked out, I mean, doesn't matter.
Well,
The
yeah.
fact of the matter is that this was like, if you want kids to come out of school informed and learning how
Yeah.
systems work, this was their firsthand self-guided view of learning what that looks like.
Right.
And what you're telling them is that their First Amendment right doesn't matter
Mhm.
because you have your own rules. And I would argue that you are looking at the school infringing upon First Amendment rights, and because the school is a part of the government is not allowed to infringe upon First Amendment rights.
Or
Let's
punish,
put that
right?
out there.
Punish
Right.
you for using
And
it.
so like that's a case that I'd be willing to take.
Mhm.
That's a case that I'd be willing to try and deal with. Like I don't view any harm that's going to come to my child, from them having one unexcused absence. But
Right.
I do not believe that when I excuse my kid because they are exercising their First Amendment right, that the government has any reason to tell me no, they're not going to
Right.
excuse
And
that.
we're going to punish your kid because you're making a bad choice. And let me ask you
I think
something.
it's a great
If your
choice.
if your child was the only child that day that left and they called and said, "Hey, your child has an unexcused absence," and you were like, "Oh no, we had a family matter, somebody died or something, whatever the would they keep it an unexcused absence or would they understand? Was it the protest that made them mad? Was it the kids all walking out and they were like, we have to punish this so it doesn't happen again? Or was it, in fact, your child
Well,
not being checked out properly? If your child was
well,
the only one that was checked out improperly, would they forgive that?
and here's what I can say is that I actually had one of my kids. They, after a particularly rough day, they had gone to a couple of classes and then they went home. Um, and because we had talked about it, it's like, hey, if mentally you're not there,
Mm-hmm.
you can go home and we'll excuse it. And the school had no problem excusing that.
Right. That's my point.
So the issue then is, if your problem is that kids are going out to protest, then I'm going to go ahead and say, yeah, you are infringing upon their First Amendment
Right.
rights. And do you really want to play that game? Now, do I think that now they're going to argue, but that opens the door for any time that a kid wants to leave campus to say that they're exercising their First Amendment rights? No, it doesn't. Going to a planned protest at the Capitol is First
Yeah.
Amendment, period, end of story. Going to the grocery store for a candy bar is not First Amendment.
Right.
And any judge is going to look at that and go, no, that's you skipping school. That's truancy, is what that
But in
is.
fact, your job as the school is to inform the parent, right?
Hmm.
And they did that. Now it's the parent's discretion on whether that was a bad thing or a good thing, right? Like,
Right.
if okay, my kid went to the store to get a candy bar, and because they weren't feeling good, and then they went home because they felt like shit. Well, guess what? They're a fucking diabetic and needed candy because they had low blood sugar. It's not up to you to judge my kids' actions. It's up to me, right?
And if I'm going to excuse it,
Right.
like, look, if my kids were missing school every fucking day and I'm calling in to excuse it every
Right.
day, yeah, you have every right to come to my house and
Mhm.
do a truancy
Talk
check.
to the parent and
Absolutely.
ask the parent, "Are you making wise choices?" You know?
Absolutely. But when there's a specific event
Uh-huh.
happening and there's a specific purpose, and it is very much dedicated to a person's right to free
Mhm.
speech, and I would also argue an excellent lesson that you can only get firsthand, not in a government class.
Agreed.
This is something where any school needs to look at this and go, you know what, it's not our job to agree or disagree.
Right.
Our job is to say your kid was unexcused. If the parent is excusing them for this, great.
Mhm.
Now, does that leave now for the parents that might not have been cool with their kid leaving
That's
school? What does
right.
that do?
Well,
Well, that's up to the
that's up to the
parent.
parent.
And And so if where I guarantee you're going to have a household where parents believe one set of things, kids believe another set of things, and the kid follows their beliefs. And then if the parent says, no, I'm not going to excuse that, that's up to the parent and the kid to then deal with their stuff together.
That's right. Yeah, and you got to remember that at their age, this is largely performative. There's no violence to it. There's no, I don't want to be a jerk, but they're learning, but there's no real meaning. You know what I mean? Because they can't
It's
vote. Like the
they
politicians
can't
look at
it's
kids and they just go, "Shut up! You don't vote." Like, you know what I mean? It's not like they're going to create any act. They're going to create awareness, which is good. But kids are pretty much performative. There's no
I
plan.
would
There's
but
no
here's the
Antifa plan to fucking like attack.
but here's what I would say is that you can say it's performative,
Yeah.
absolutely. I would also say it's informative,
Oh
because
yeah, yeah, yeah.
what happens is that when they see that these peers are not going to listen to them
Mm-hmm.
and what they value as important, those kids become voters
Yes.
eventually. And when those kids see that this group of people isn't going to value them,
Mm-hmm.
they are going to become voters that vote for things that you're not going to like,
Right.
period, end of story. And guess what? It is your job to either help chauffeur them into the system in that regard, show them what this looks like, what is possible,
Yeah.
or you can be a dickhead about it and they're going to form their own opinions and beliefs without your input. And whether or not you agree with it, well, it becomes even less involved with you.
Right.
You will just be there watching and observing the things that they do. It's kind of like that ruling with an iron fist as a parent. You shouldn't be fucking surprised that when your kid finally leaves that they just go fucking crazy. And why?
Wow, I was thinking about that about transgender rights and abortion rights. Try telling a kid no. You can't. You can't even look into it. That's all they're gonna do. And here's the other thing about these protests, there's no kid gloves for them. When you're going to a protest, there's some dangers there that kids need to know about. So the parents should know these things ahead of time like your kids did. Like
Mm-hmm.
parents shouldn't overreact to what their kids are going to do anyway, but they should help them get through it like you did. There's kids that didn't tell their parents about this because they knew their parents
Absolutely.
would worry and helicopter. But kids should know there's dangerous elements at every protest and it might get out of hand in a way that you didn't expect really fast.
And that's and that was and my goal is like, look, my kids viewed this as very important to them. Great. How can I help? Is there anything I can do to
You're
help?
right.
And basically it's like, okay, here's what I would recommend bringing along. Here's what I would recommend watching out for. And
Right.
if things suddenly turn heated and things get violent,
Right.
here is your plan of escape.
Yes.
Let's look at
Pay
that. It's like,
attention. Pay
luckily,
attention
luck.
early. If people around you start yelling and pushing, get out of there. Right? Like, pay
Mhm.
attention to your surroundings. That'll tell you where to go every time.
And guess what? It was peaceful. It
Of course
dispersed.
it was.
My kids literally messaged me. One was like, "Yeah, I'm catching a ride, back, home on the bus with, a couple other friends."
Yeah.
And the other's like, "Yeah, we're heading downtown to find some pizza." I'm like, "Cool."
Right. What was the discussion like with you guys all when you got together? Did they talk about it with you and everything?
They talked a little bit about it.
Right.
There was a bunch of different speakers. They got to listen to a lot of different messages, why what they were doing was
Yeah.
important, any number of things. And for kids to get that hands-on experience, that hands-on chance to learn something, it's absolutely
Yeah.
incredible, because this is one of those things where you don't really know how often you're going to get lessons like this. You don't really know how often you're going to deal with something that impacts you directly.
Right.
And it's important that if something drives you out to the streets to protest, that you exercise your First Amendment rights. And more importantly, explain what the First Amendment does and doesn't cover. It's like, I'm sorry, First Amendment rights, they cover the right to free speech. They don't cover violence.
Right.
It's like, I get it. You can be pissed and smash out a bunch of windows. That's not freedom of
Do
expression.
they cover temporary chalk on a sidewalk?
Well, see, I laughed at that
Yeah.
because when they wrote in chalk outside of somebody's sidewalk,
Susan Collins.
uh, yep, I was trying to think of who
Yeah.
it was. I actually laughed because Susan Collins acted all affronted.
Yeah.
Here in Olympia, they actually spray painted on
Yeah.
our mayor Cheryl Selby's house,
Right.
and she's a Democrat, and she
I
called them
know.
fucking terrorists.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was like, wow.
There is a different brand of protesters over there. Like
Like,
somebody tried comparing the protests in front of Alito's house to the Black Lives Matters protests, and I was like, there's no comparison. Like, but then you
no.
think about Portland, and wow, like there's another brand.
Portland and Seattle,
Yeah.
those were
But see, when I watched those protests, I watched journalists getting shot. Like, I watched them getting peppered with fireworks and rubber bullets. And, like, I didn't see a
yep.
lot of protesters fighting. I saw a lot of them running or standing. Like, I didn't see them attacking police until police decided to, like, fucking start pushing them. So my version of it was different. And a lot of times I think that there's an element that goes to these things, like you said earlier, to cause trouble. I don't know who they are, but their idea is to make the protest look bad. And they do that in every minority sort of
Well,
protest.
that's I don't even know that it's that their idea is to make the protest. I do think that there is that element, but I also do think that there's the element out there that they think that what they're doing is actually going to start a revolution.
Like all over the country, we're going to burn down the rich man's stuff and leave. It doesn't work.
Right. And like, this is one of those things where I can only, from what I have read, from what I have watched, I can only look at things objectively from the lens that I have seen through history.
Mhm.
And that is, the civil rights protests worked the way that they did because there was violence, but there was only one party that was being violent.
Right.
And that group of people lost sympathy.
That's right. That's what Gandhi knew. Let them beat you. Don't react. If you don't react, it shows the world that they're the tyrant. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yep. And so that's what happened. That was what happened. But when you look at a lot of the other protests, when the groups of people who didn't react, they did great things.
Yes.
They really did manage to start changing things
in an ethnic coalition too, by the way. It wasn't just black people. Like even Al Frank or what's his name? Reverend what's his name? Sharpton. Even Sharpton,
Al Sharpton
said thank you to all the white people, the disabled people, the Native American people, the Latino people. He said it was amazing, the diversity that came out, the younger, the older. That was a really great moment for America because of a really shitty fucking situation.
But when you look at the places where things turned violent, you didn't see the same level of change.
Okay.
You didn't see the same level of positive forward movement, because now instead of having just a bunch of cops using pepper balls and flashbangs on a bunch of peaceful protesters, you had two parties that were arguably, in some cases just as violent, clash with each other. I mean, you look at what happened with the East Seattle Police Department, where they tried to burn it down.
Right.
I mean,
that was a whole quadrant. They took over a whole, protesters took that quadrant over of the city for months, right?
For a couple months, I want to say. But then it petered out.
Of course it did.
Because it became a lawless area.
Because the only people with time to do that are people without lives.
It became a lawless. It became lawless in that area, and I don't mean that sans police. What I mean is all of these tenets that they had put in place for these occupied protests. All of their quote unquote rules fell apart. Like, there was a lot of love initially. There was a lot of really great excitement, but then you started having, people getting shot and stabbed and robberies and all of that. and they would call the police to come try and deal with this, and the police were like,
What?
no, you told us you didn't want us there,
Right.
so we're not going.
And then there was a lot of shop owners that couldn't open their doors, that lost businesses in that area. You need a plan. Like, we go out and we rush out there because of a protest, because of something, but nobody has the long-term plan other than to just yell and shout into the wind, and that sucks, you know?
Yeah.
But that's the activist. Like, I tell everybody, it takes everyone in the chain, from Deja to us to the activist. You know what I mean? The advocate
Right.
to the activist to the legislator. It takes all of us. Activists get the attention, but advocates tell you the message, and that's what we do, I think.
And absolutely, that's one of the biggest problems that you've seen consistently with large protests.
Mhm.
You've watched as Occupy Wall Street was a great idea. Wall Street was completely fucking things over,
Right.
but you watched it completely fall apart due to infighting.
Mhm.
And rather than sticking to a strategic set of goals, it just fell
Yeah,
apart.
they lose the goals because they didn't put any thought into what they wanted. They just wanted it to
Well,
stop, right? And they just didn't know how
Well-
to ask for it.
Well, they wanted it to stop, and that's a perfectly fine goal. But the
Mhm.
problem was
Then
that
what?
they didn't even get that. They started moving the goalposts. It's like, well, we want all of this, and then you had competing parties
Ah.
saying, no, we want this and that, and then they'll just fracture,
Yep.
and nothing changed. And you started to see that with the protests from 2020,
Mhm.
but in some places things did change. Some changed because, well,
Yeah.
shit went sideways. Other places changed because they wanted to get ahead of issues like
Yeah.
that. And they're like, you know what? There are some legitimate complaints here. Like, why couldn't we just have someone who, they're a police officer, but they're a peace officer.
Yeah.
They're going out there, they're not doing anything other than, trying to deal with things in a civil community manner.
Mhm.
Like, how do we get things fixed without fucking things
Community
up?
oversight
With shooting
commission,
without
right?
Yeah, exactly. So
You give the people
in some
subpoena
ways,
power, and you let them see the evidence, and then they bring it, right? Like the community panels like that. If you give them subpoena powers, they can actually make a difference.
so in some places you actually saw change that didn't really get rocked by protests at all.
Yeah.
Because they looked at what was happening across the country and they went, you know what, there are some valid things here that should be changed, and let's make those changes before we have a problem ourselves.
Yes, because plan ahead or fall behind, right?
Or what I tell people is, you can be compliant on your own volition, and yeah, it sucks that you're going to have to spend the money on it, but it's either that or you become compliant based on penalties,
Right.
whether that's lawsuits, whether that's the government coming in, whatever that looks like. It is usually easier to change because you want
Yes.
to than it is to change because you have to, and now are being forced to pay out the nose.
And that's Jeffrey's Just the Tip. Thank you for listening to Public Access America. Find us anywhere you find your favorite podcast, and check us out on YouTube, noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. We'll be back this Thursday with more great episodes.
To those who would tear the world down, we will defeat you. This is our moment. This is our time. To those who seek peace and security, we support you. Yes, we can. And to all those who have wondered if America's beacon still burns as bright, tonight we proved once more that the true strength of our nation comes not from the might of our arms or the scale of our wealth, but from the enduring power of our ideals, democracy, liberty, opportunity, and unyielding hope.
Let me tell you something you already know. The world ain't all sunshine and rainbow. It's a very mean and nasty place, and I don't care how tough you are, it will beat you to your knees and keep you there permanently if you let it. You, me, or nobody is gonna hit as hard as life.
Ask not.
Yes, we can.
What your country can do for you.
I have a dream.
Ask what you can do for your country.
My poor little children. Yes, we can.
One day live in a nation nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character.
I don't have to tell you things are bad. Everybody knows things are bad. It's a depression.
In this lifetime, you don't have to prove nothing to nobody except yourself.
But it ain't about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. How much you can take and keep moving forward.
That's how winning is done.
Welcome to Public Access America.
Yes, we can.
Sunday live streams on YouTube.
I wanted to run out of that tunnel for my dad.
On Twitter,
What?
Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Smart Radio, Public, and Spotify.
Yes, we can.
Public Access America. History in the making. Making history in the making.
It's Tango Day, everybody. Follow after me. And step, and bet, and slide, and dip. That's tango.
Why is Ice-T leading our tango class?
It's probably the Honey Nut Cheerios. He found out they can help lower cholesterol. Now he's having fun taking care of his heart in all sorts of new ways.
Let's see those hips move, people.
Learn more by picking up a box of Cheerios and check out our Pour Your Heart Into It audio workouts with Ice-T and Buzz to get your heart pumping.